Welcome everyone to a new episode of Your Friendly Physicist and Other Nerds. I'm Lucas, the host of this podcast show, and together with other nerds and scientists, I'm taking a close look at trends in cutting-edge technology, and together we explain how the smallest things influence the big. So stay tuned and get comfy, no matter if you're a newbie to physics and interested to learn about the world of friendly scientists, or if you're up for a PhD-worthy nerd talk. And as usual, I'm not alone on the show. A very warm welcome to today's guest. Hello, Sarah Jessl.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Looking forward to it.
Me too. Before we start, I would like to introduce you. So you studied chemistry, bachelor and your master studies at the University of Bayreuth. And then you moved for your PhD to the UK, to the University of Cambridge, where you studied batteries. And maybe you can shortly summarize your PhD topic in one or two sentences for the audience.
So I was focusing in Bayreuth a lot on colloidal chemistry. So I thought this is a really good topic to also bring into my PhD. And I was working on new anode materials, mostly for lithium-ion batteries, new structures, not necessarily synthesizing a new material, but making a structure that would hopefully help. Yeah, I'm saying it would hopefully help. It didn't always turn out the way it was, but just a proof of concept on saying how can we charge batteries faster and make them last longer by having a porous structure. It was super interesting.
Yeah. I think I Googled your dissertation recently, and I definitely will have a look on this. After your PhD, you moved back to Germany and you joined the chemistry company BASF. Your role there was a lab manager, and there you also focus more on the polymer side of or polymer sector of this company. Right?
Yeah, I did switch fields a little bit from the more inorganic batteries part back to kind of the polymer and colloidal science I was doing before. It's a very typical position to go into the lab management after your PhD. And I did that in the analytics department, I think it's analytical materials, and was focusing on the characterization of dispersions and polymers using ultracentrifugation, field flow fractionation, and then also microplastic analytics, which was also really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice that you said you went back to the polymer side, polymer colloidals. If you start to work with polymers, somehow you start to like them, and you always come back to the polymer. It was the same for me.
Yeah.
And after BASF, you then went to the Technical University of Munich, and here you are at your current position, the managing director of the venture lab ChemSpace here in Munich. And this would also be the topic of this episode. So I would call it, or I think we discussed a bit how to name this episode, and I think we ended with "Can Scientists Found a Startup?" I think this was the question title of this episode. And this is where I want to talk to you about in the next half an hour, 45 minutes. Let's see where we end.
Super excited.
And one point I also want to mention, you also give workshops for personal development, intercultural competencies, and leadership. And I think this you're doing as a self-employed, right?
Exactly. When I was studying in Bayreuth, I was also part of ISEC, the student organization, and they have this amazing education on how to do trainings together with Neuland. And I realized that in conferences and so on, I really like making the concept for a workshop, having it very interactive and all of that. And this is what I do partly in my job, of course, for some of the education that I do. We'll talk about that, I think, in a little bit. But I also do on the side with a slightly different focus on intercultural things like going abroad preparation, things like that.
Yeah, it's really a super interesting CV. The fundamental science part, developing new batteries, but then also the industry, the large industry, lab managing role, and now at the startup entrepreneur surrounding environment, and also like the soft skill side. This is really nice. I'm really looking forward to to this discussion. Okay, let's talk about you and your position at the TUM Venture Lab. What exactly is your job there?
let me start with like why I took this job, I guess, because BASF, I think, is an amazing working environment with a lot of opportunities and all of that. But for me, I realized that I would love to be closer to like the scientists in the lab, in research, mostly because I believe that a lot of potential lies there, a lot of potential for our solutions that we urgently need in climate change, that we need for our current issues. So at the time I was looking around, the Venture Labs, the TUM Venture Labs got started in Munich with the focus of saying, we do amazing stuff in entrepreneurship already. We can talk about that in a little bit, but now we should really focus more in the domains, the technology specific support. And for me, of course, that was chemistry. And so I thought this is a really nice position to have as a next step. I know the industry view a bit. I'm also a scientist, but I'm also a trainer. I do the soft skill part. And I think this is a lot of times exactly where the connection lies, right? I understand the technology of researchers that come with ideas that say stuff like, hey, how do I bring this to life? How do I found a company, license it, things like that. And we can talk to them and support them on their way. And this is exactly what I do in the chemical area.
Listening to you, I understand that the TUM Venture Lab itself is then basically providing infrastructure, providing support to students that have an idea and want to, let's say, commercialize it or bring it on the road to a working device or something else, right?
Exactly. I think for that to understand it, so the TUM has the Unternehmertum, which was founded in 2002, I think, and they are already doing a lot of entrepreneurial support. They have amazing programs. They have really good support. But what sometimes is missing is really the domain knowledge. And in our case, this is a lot of lab stuff, lab structure, infrastructure there. In additive manufacturing, this is having access to the 3D printers, to all the technologies and methods, which is why the TUM Venture Labs are also not just, they are one network, but they're also split into many different domains. I think we're 12 at the moment, and they have huge overlaps, right? But they everywhere have the domain specific knowledge. We have healthcare with people that are close to the Klinikum Rechts der Isar that have the contact to medics. We have food agrobiotech in Weinstefan with people that are surrounded really by all the food experts, by the agriculture experts. And here in chemistry, we also have the contact to a lot of different experts. I'm saying different experts because chemistry is so broad. And I know the physicists always say it's like the layer of everything is physics. I keep saying chemistry. I know this is not completely right, but it's kind of, it can range from the life science area, right? Organic chemistry, molecules, proteins, all this development in the direction of pharma. But it can also be a battery. It can be the hydrogen focus, the green chemical recycling area, circular chemistry, all of that. And we kind of try to really support all of it because this is the type of research that is going on here. It has a really big breadth, I guess. So we're also trying to build the network for the startups to be successful there.
Already sounds huge, a huge network with a lot of experts. But as you said, I mean, chemistry itself is a lot of fields. And it's
I think the overall network is amazing, right? In chemistry, we have experts in all areas, but we can still make it bigger and it would be more interesting. We're also working nationally together with the chemistry incubators. But just to have this, to give the people access to the network, to give researchers access to a network that they sometimes never saw, right? The connection to the externals, to industry. Sometimes that's not there.
When was the TUM Venture Labs founded, or when did it start exactly?
Well, I started in May 2021. I think officially founded they were in January 2021 as a TUM initiative, and then our Venture Labs Management GmbH as a third part between TUM, Unternehmertum, and us was, I think, founded in the beginning of 2022.
Yeah, that matches a bit with my experience from my PhD. So I did my PhD also at the TUM at the physics department, and I defended 2021. And I had barely any connection with, let's say, with any startup or industry or anything. I think at the physics department, at our chair, we had, I think, one PhD who had like an industry related topic with Osram. And then I think even with BASF was one time. And later when I went as to the DLR as a postdoc, so the German Aerospace Center, there it changed a bit. Maybe it was because you come from a university to a research institute, which was a bit more closer to, let's say, applied sciences. There you had a kind of a different structure where the DLR also supported you with a network, with infrastructure, with labs, with expertise, with experts in the science, but also in all the legal stuff and bureaucracy and administration and this stuff. And I think also with money. So they gave you a certain amount of money, which after a certain amount of time you also had to return then eventually. But that's basically it, where I had experiences with this surroundings. Now I ask you, why is TUM now, or here the Technical University of Munich, why are they now investing so much resources and so much money into such an environment?
I think it's grown for a while, right? The Unternehmertum 2002 as a spin-off from TUM. The TUM entrepreneurship part is actually already there for many years. It's a huge department also at TUM Forte, Forschungsförderung und Technologietransfer. Compared to other universities that I talk to that talk about patents and licenses and things like that have like one person that helps, TUM has for years now had a huge support of that. And I think this is something that they decided with becoming the entrepreneurial university, that they really want to foster, I think, more a mindset in a way rather than just spin off. I think it's good to also have the support for startups, and obviously it's good because this is what the venture labs also do. But TUM in general has focused on having that mindset of like changing something when you don't like it, having a more entrepreneurial approach in a lot of things. And I think it's just building on it, right? It's grown for a few years. It might not have reached all the disciplines yet. I do know in the chemistry department, we're also working on programs on getting people in touch with entrepreneurial thinking. The programs are there. I think it's a lot of mindset that is already there in a lot of disciplines at TUM, which is really cool. And that we are helping now as the next step to bring more into the domains. Why is TUM doing this? I think this is the future, right? It's one of the universities who really takes the step of saying, not everybody wants to stay in academia and not everybody wants to go to big industry, or maybe they want to do both, but there is another way. They can do other things. And we have so many ideas. I mean, the research at TUM or at a lot of universities actually is really amazing. But if you don't focus on that commercialization potential, in addition to doing the amazing research, you lose it. You lose it because there's a paper and it's in the drawer, as I said, and that's it. And I think nowadays we realize more and more how much we need innovation, how much we need new ideas, how much we need to follow up on it in order to have the solutions for the future. And I feel like TUM is really one of the like leaders in that field here in Germany, saying, hey, we really want to do that, and we want to do that not only in software, which is great, but also in really deep tech, like TUM and Unternehmertum, I guess, but really in deep tech ventures and supporting them, seeing how we can help and how we can make use of this amazing research.
It's obvious that you want to preserve the knowledge that comes out, let's say, from a 4-year PhD thesis. It should not end up in a drawer, but especially what you said, the mindset, you see, there are so many things I can do in this environment besides staying in academia as a postdoc after your PhD or going to big industry like BASF or Infineon, at least here in Germany. But there are also other models of scientific careers that you can choose. And this is, I think, very important that these roles or these positions and opportunities are visible.
And it's not mutually exclusive, right? It means if you do a startup and you should really fail, which is, yes, it's a possibility. It's something that happens and it's okay. But that doesn't mean you can never go back into industry, or you can never go the industrial path, for example, because you will have learned so much and it will be very valuable in industry. And I think this is also important to keep in mind, that it's not always either or. So I need to decide right in my PhD what I do forever. It is actually something that is super interesting to explore also and to look into, because yeah, you can maybe do both one after another if you want to. But yeah, you can also, if a startup fails, there's nothing you really lose in that way
Is this
if you
also,
do it smartly.
we come to this in a second,
Yeah.
how to do it smartly. But is this also part of the mindset you want to
It
share
would
here?
be amazing, right? I had one of the lectures with entrepreneurship for chemists, which I did at TUM, I think 2 years ago. We invited Björn Heinz from the BASF Chemovator, not there anymore, now at a VC, venture capitalists. But he also gave a talk on how beneficial this experience can be, how cool it is. I mean, if you look at the PhDs, there's definitely exceptions, but most of the PhD, at least from what I saw in Germany, is like you work in the lab, you maybe do some teaching, but you don't necessarily engage in many, many other activities. So when I look at Cambridge, where I did my PhD, there's so many student organizations, right? And people, I organized a few conferences while I was doing my PhD. I was head of the Nanotech Society, all kinds of things like that that give you a bit more skills in the more soft skill area. It's not super common, I think, in Germany yet. A little bit, maybe, definitely. As I say, like, there are some people that do that, and that's absolutely amazing. But sometimes you become a lab team lead at BASF and you really have only seen your own lab and done a bit of teaching.
Yeah.
When you've done your startup, you've interacted so much with other people. You've probably written, I don't know, a business plan, or you've thought about the financing, you thought about business models. And this for a company, at least according to what also Björn said, is like super helpful and valuable. And that makes you more interesting actually to a company rather than saying, oh, you've got a failed startup, you must be really bad.
Yeah.
Because that is really not what is happening.
Yeah, I think here the PhDs in Germany are still rather the classic way. So
Mhm.
you do your research, you write the paper, you go to conference, and then you start again. Of course, it changes, and of course, not every PhD is the same. You have all
Yeah.
kind of disciplines and all kind of different universities or research institutes or cooperations with industry. I think it
Yeah.
splits more up now, and you have more possibilities. But still, I think, and this is also the impression when I talk to other PhDs or postdocs, you have to look for these opportunities proactively, and you
Yeah.
have to really search and to talk to people and
Yeah.
going out and look for
Yeah.
opportunities. It's nothing that your professor comes or some people come and give a seminar or
Yeah.
the last 5 minutes of a lecture and say, hey, there are this, and this opportunity. Whoever wants to join, we are meeting in the beer garden at 7 p.m. We have an informal
Mhm.
discussion, and then you can see if this is something for you or not.
Yeah.
This is still not really the case, I would say.
I would agree. I mean, most of my experience obviously is from the natural science field. I don't know that much about the social PhDs or something. Not that they're worth less or something. It's just I
No,
don't know enough.
yeah.
But speaking as a natural scientist, I think what I've seen is exactly that, and it is slightly different, at least in the UK, from what I know. It is becoming better, I think, and more interesting because people don't just want to focus on their research. It is important to focus on the research, but it is also important to learn, I don't know, about some social skills, about some business skills, because especially in academia, but also as a PI, right? You immediately ask, like, how do you want to finance your research? Please do a listing of all those things. And then you learn by doing, and that's great.
Mhm.
But there are also some supportive seminars, things like that somewhere. They are, I think they exist. It's just that it's not integrated in the education in that way.
No, it's not. And it's also quite hard to implement it given the workload. Scientists,
Absolutely.
especially then at higher levels after your
Yeah.
postdoc, basically, or once you become a PI.
Yeah. And it's
But
similar for startups, right? The
Mhm.
seminars are there, especially at TUM, not at every university, but at the TUM, especially with all the TUM entrepreneurship formats, like the entrepreneurship day and things like that, but also with the Unternehmertum, who has stuff like the tech challenge or innovative entrepreneurs as a lecture. There is stuff you can learn from, but first you, I guess, need to know about it. And that's what I mean with like mindset change. It's a little bit this, hey, we could also do it. We don't have to, I don't know, found a new PayPal. And we're definitely not, as chemists or as natural scientists, we're definitely not the right ones for that. But just showcasing a little bit more in terms of role models also, that this is something that is also there for people that work on the lab bench. And I mean, we all know about biotech, I guess, by now, which is great and just sounds like suddenly they're successful, which is obviously absolutely not the case. But they took the leap and they were like, okay, we want to do a company out of it. And as bad as COVID was, for them, it made them really well known and successful. That's really nice. And I think what is good is that at least it shows to part of the chemists that this can also be done. You can be successful coming from a lab environment, doing very deep tech research. And it's just that there's not so many role models yet. There's not so much infrastructure yet. And this is exactly what we want to help with and change, because it's like super important stuff they do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You do, I guess, because you're also a scientist.
I'm also a scientist. And I mean, you already draw the comparison between a startup and, let's say, a PI in academia. And there are so many parallels where you, as a professor, as a PI, you have one of the most privileged jobs in the world, I think, because you are your own startup with a super high level of security. Obviously, this changes when you bring this startup out of the academic world and into, let's say, an industry business world. But of course, you have then also different and other possibilities than in academia. But the similarities are there, I would say.
I feel like there's a lot of similarities, which is why I'm so surprised that this is not in people's heads they could do it. Because honestly, when I look at, I mean, let's leave the industry a little bit out because it's like permanent contracts, immediately very well paid. This is like, I think, the highest security route you can go in terms of also, finance and security. But when you compare academia to startups, with short-term contracts, with maybe moving around, with being measured by papers in this case, but just like being measured in terms of your output also, which is something that startups also have. How far did you get with your research? I think this is super similar. And what people also do in the lab, everybody's like, oh, in startups, you need to be so flexible and so innovative and all of that. But that's exactly what researchers do in the lab, right? You fail nearly every day in some experiment, and then you just like revise and you try the next one. So in a way, I think in people's heads it's a bit separate, but in a way it's exactly the mindset we also need. This, let's see how we can make it work. And
absolutely,
it would fit really well to bring the worlds closer together and to see what we can make out of it. I totally understand there's researchers that say, I want to do very basic research and just understand it, and there is no direct commercialization potential. Totally fine, because we definitely also need that. But there's a lot of times there's really interesting spin-offs or interesting ideas that come from that research that then can be taken further to the real world, as I always say, I mean, like the industry, commercial world. Yes, it's also the real world in the lab, but in a way.
In a way.
In a way.
You're absolutely right. Because whenever I ask this question, so usually I ask the question, we should make, or I say the sentence, we should make a collaboration or we should make a paper out of this. But more and more, I think, hey, we should try to make a product out of it, or we should try to upscale it in a way that it might be interesting for a real world application now or within 2 years, and not as for fundamental research, maybe in 15 years or in 20 years or even further. I mean, you're absolutely right. We need fundamental research because fundamental research now will solve or will contribute to solving problems in the future, let's say. But whenever I ask the question to scientists, have you thought about bringing this into a commercial market sector to solve problems there? I always get the answer, or the question back, but does it really work? So does it really work to found a startup? Can scientists found a startup? It sounds super overwhelming at first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just showcasing a fear that is there, right? And missing skills in that way. Because of course, I guess when you ask this question, it's mostly to other researchers, to people who work in the lab, who do their maybe grants, but haven't really gotten that feeling that they know so much about the business world and strategies you need there and all of that. And this is, I think, where it just becomes important that you then get the support you need, right? You say, I want to do this. I believe in my technology. You will never know if it fails at some point because sometimes scale up is not possible or changes a lot of things. I think when I take my PhD thesis, the way I was working on those anode structures, I really struggle at the moment to see how we could scale this up. So if we wanted to do a project that is immediately scalable, I would have probably done a different approach. None of this is like right or wrong. It's just like good to notice it, I guess. And if this was something where we say like, okay, those porous structures work super, super well, and the next project could have been, how can we make it scalable?
Yeah.
And I think exactly what you're saying with this is the questions I asked for one thing is super important because that already shows there is interest, because without scientist interest, we can only do so much, right? We can read patents. If it's patented, we can try to find interested teams in those patents. There are definitely strategies like that. But the best thing is if the PI and then maybe even a postdoc or a PhD are willing to take this further. This might not always be as a CEO in a startup because sometimes there's different skills needed. But the CTO position definitely totally makes sense. And then a lot of it is a discussion, right? Like what is your interest in? Do you want to learn more about the business side? Is it really so far away? Kind of like you feel like we had discussions. How do I do market research? This sounds like a super skilled kind of thing. In the end, sometimes people just Google.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this is all it is, but sometimes it's also a wording thing. Business plan sounds super scary, super complicated to many scientists because we've never done it, right? We don't know, none of it in our studies is in it.
Yeah.
But in a way, I think the willingness to learn new things in addition to what we know is all that is needed. And then looking at the expertises, if you have two co-founders already that are from the same team, maybe you want to get a third one who already has all the business background and understands the technology a little bit, but not as in depth as the others. At TUM, this is like we have this TUM BWL and Management and Technology Masters, which is super cool because they do so much business knowledge, economy stuff, but they also have a subject that is then focused more on the science of it. This can be informatics, this can be chemistry. That's really nice for me finding somebody who's interested in technologies because it shows that they're also interested in the technologies, but also have the knowledge from the business side. It's about matchmaking in the end, right? And if it doesn't work personally, this is something we can't influence. It just doesn't. You can't throw a team together, in my opinion, and be like, go forever.
Yeah.
That's just,
Yeah, it's about matchmaking, absolutely. And about visibility, I would say, as well, as we discussed before. Because if you have these role models or you see someone who has already done it before, then the barrier to do it yourself becomes lower. And okay, let's find out if it works. Also, this failure mindset. Yeah, failure is not a bad thing. It's actually quite
absolutely
nice.
not. But living in Germany, this can be a bit of a struggle, right? We get taught from school onwards with like grades and all of this. Now you have failed. Nobody ever says, cool, you made so many mistakes, but next time you'll learn from it and you'll not do them again. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing to say for people to not be so afraid of doing something wrong?
I studied half a year at a college in the US, and whenever I spoke to a US student there about failure, it was like speaking two completely different languages. It was one of these aha moments. So, failure, actually is right, or she's right. It's not a bad thing because you learn from it and then you evolve as a scientist.
Absolutely. And I think asking the questions, what do you really have to lose, is always really good, because there are situations where you really shouldn't fail, where there's, I don't know, too much money involved, or which is why I said before, when you go right about things, like if you put all your savings in your startup and then it fails, of course, that can be an issue. That can be an issue for you, for your family. If you have kids and you need to support them and your startup fails, also that can be an issue. And I'm not saying it's never, but most of the time when you ask people what is the worst thing that can happen, that's not so much usually. That's, yes, okay, I won't have a salary for a month or two, but then living in Germany, that's amazing because then you just get the money from the state. and then you start again or you apply again. Or it's kind of like saying that what I said with industry, then all my doors will be closed and I won't be able to find another job, which I also think is really not true. And yeah, it's really it's very negatively connotated, but I think it is changing, especially in the startup ecosystem world, and hopefully soon also in others, because most of the time, there are situations where it's not, but it's not that bad if the startup phase. If scaling doesn't work, fine. Then try something else. Do a new startup, I don't know, or go into like the safe job in industry and use your skills there. They will be also really happy.
Absolutely. So I hope we encouraged some of our listeners to found a startup now.
That would be amazing. Reach
That would
out
be
to me.
amazing. Reach out to Sarah, of course.
Mhm.
But maybe we can make a checklist. So if a young, motivated scientist now decides, hey, I have an idea and I think
Mhm.
this might be just the right product or the right idea for problem 1, 2, 3,
Mhm.
how to found a startup, where to start, what do I need?
I think it depends where you are. If there's like, I would say in Munich, come to one of the ecosystems and talk to a person in your field because they will directly be able to help you with the questions that need to be asked. That's easy in that way that you have a direct support. Most universities have some patent and licensing offices or some options to go and talk to them, because one of the first questions probably will be also IP. What's your IP strategy? Have you thought about to whom belongs the IP? Who does need to get involved? Thinking about not publishing before you patent, making that invention no note at the patent and licensing office before you publicly talk about it. All those, like, one of the first things is, where does the idea stand? Is it still novel? Is it still new? And can I get a patent out of it? Or is it already communicated and I just go the
Mhm.
step down and see what else I could do?
So
Yeah.
just a short question. You
Yeah.
cannot patent an idea if it's already published?
No, because then it's public knowledge.
Okay.
So even if you do a presentation on a conference, it is considered as common knowledge that is already out there. And this is something in terms of mindset that needs to be there, right? Thinking about it, and then and it's nothing that is really slowing you down or anything, because you can make this invention note that you send to the patenting office, and they help you to get it also out, because we know researchers need papers and all of that. They really help you get it out as soon as possible to not impede your career or anything. It's just something good to know. So that would be some of the questions to look at IP,
Okay.
look at a financing strategy. I don't know, are you employed at the university? How long do you have? What would you like to, do you already have a route in mind you want to go towards? Do you want to apply for some public funding? There's amazing public funding that you can apply for to actually support your idea, to support the development, I don't know, of the first prototype, or the first proof of concept, to see if, I don't know, depending on where your idea stands, if it works the way you're thinking of. And public funding in that way is great, that you don't give them parts of your company. You just you apply for it. You of course have to prove that this is a valid project, but otherwise, that's it. It's not like getting private money from business angels or from venture capital firms who ask for part of your company, which is fine too, right? Later on, it's okay
Yeah.
to give them part of your company for getting the money to actually take the project further. Different routes to consider. It will depend highly on the individual preferences, on the individual, also timelines, routes, the topics, um, drug discovery things. Pharma take 10 to 15 years often to develop. It's very different from, hey, maybe we can sell, I don't know, like the quantum diamond team who's selling quantum diamonds now within a year basically of realizing, or 2 years of realizing that they could do that. It really depends on the development time and all of that. So yeah, the checklist is IP, financing. Then we would look at the team and try to see how that is set up, how we can help with that. I talked about the business part. Is that there? Is there somebody who could help? Looking at the way the communication is. So when you do a it's called a pitch, right? But it basically means a presentation of your idea. Do people that are not from the field understand what you're saying? Can you convince others that this is really a problem in the real world? And then, is there even a problem? Sometimes things are not a problem. And then you will have a hard time, even if you're scientifically really excited about it, you will have a hard time selling it. That's like all those checks, and this can be done with others. You can also do that yourself, but it's always easier to see if there's any support systems that you can go to. Unternehmertum has many formats where people with ideas like Explore can go to. That's a program that is, I think, 3 months, and they get support with all kinds of questions like, what is your business model? How do you want to make money? How do you learn how to pitch? Like, do those presentations really in a way that people understand. There are many things out there, but I think the first step is reaching out either to your local technology transfer offices, to people like us at the TUM Venture Lab, to the Unternehmertum, talking to your PI. Maybe they have already, I don't know, some kind of experience. Maybe they know some startups. It's always good to talk to other startups, especially if we just had the analytical part. If they've also done analytical equipment, it is definitely most of the time not exactly the same. So it's not competition, but the route can be very similar. And the questions they faced in the beginning. So in a way, it's like, once you have an idea and you've decided you want to do this, there are so many people that can help you. So just reach out, take that step, and get the support, because it's so hard to do it alone.
And I think this first step is the hardest one, to reach out to the first person about this idea, but then it becomes from this person, you know, 3 other persons, and then it splits up, and then you are surrounded by experts in the respective fields, like business plan, finance, that you need for your idea.
And I think talking about an idea makes it real, right? And that can be very scary.
Yeah. Speak it into existence.
Absolutely. Yeah. But there's no way around it, right? If you want to bring something, make something bigger, bring it to life, you need to talk about it. And also because people a lot of times say, so what if they steal our idea? Most of the time, you don't have to go into so much detail that everybody understands. Then there's a lot of times within a university, in the contracts anyways, confidentiality clauses that you can't easily close everything to others, to externals. And it's just an idea. And I'm not saying this in a bad way. It's just find the people who do it exactly as good as you can do it. That's really hard in a lot of lab-based science areas, and might not happen as easily. Like, still be cautious, but most of the time when you talk about it, it's not likely that somebody just steals your idea and walks off with it.
Absolutely not. I mean, I just come back from the lab where we try to reproduce some hydrogel-based batteries out from a paper, and we read the experimental section. Wow, this is nice, super detailed. And then you go to the lab, and then how did they do this step? Huh? It's not that easy. It's not that easy. So what do you say? How large are typical startup groups that come to you with an idea and ask for help?
A lot of times, I would say like 2 to 3 people. It really depends on the field. We have one of the startups that scaled really, really fast right now, and they were like 5 engineers who have been working together for a long time. That happens too. The science in there and the prototyping and so on was really very solid already. Like we could barely help because they didn't need that anymore. But then there's people that are like 1 or 2 people saying, hey, during my PhD, I found this. Can I make something out of it? And that's great. That's great because we can ask the right questions. We can help guide them a little bit. And then we can see, also Explore as a program has this part where talents can apply. And a lot of times that's people with business knowledge that don't have the idea. And then you can, for the time of the program, for example, work together with them, see if that matches, and you get that expertise in. Because in the end, a lot of it is about team and startups, right? VCs, like venture capitalists that give the money later, but also the public funding grants, they a lot of times ask about the team, and they ask things like, do you have a business person, or do you have the expertise, like also technology-wise, in your team? Which, of course, for science teams is not a problem. The technology expertise is usually there, but there can be business teams, right, that need the technology expertise. So looking at your team, like, yeah, two people coming, and then we see, is there something missing? Do we need to find another chemist, for example, from an area because it's mostly engineers, or like what would be the right team composition? I think it's always also important to look at gender diversity a little bit, because startup founding, like 11% of people in overall Germany, not only deep tech, but overall are women. That's not a really great number, but definitely many issues connected to it, right? But just asking that question of, hey, how did this come past? Do you have somebody in mind? Are there issues? Learning more about it, helping with that is definitely a point. So not only the expertise, but also diversity in many ways, because diverse teams perform better, right? They're in general harder to manage in the beginning. But when you have different perspectives, and that's not only gender, that's all kinds of diversity, that's really cool. And we do focus quite a bit on asking about the teams, mostly because one of the main reasons startups fail is actually that the teams don't get along anymore. Different reasons, different things, but the team is one of the most important aspects, because if you have the right team, you can change your strategy quite easily, kind of however easy that is. But yeah. But also in rough times, right? When you have a bigger company, it is so important that the leading like team, the C-level, I don't know what you want to call it, is really aligned and can just take charge of the teams, of the people, and lead them through those, I don't know, not having money, not, I don't know, we all know the last years were quite a bit of a hassle with things happening. So really helping guiding their teams, their company through that. And for that, you need a really strong founding team.
Yeah, but that's cool. I mean, this is the matchmaking process you just described that you take care of. But then, as I understood, you really look into the team structure and say, okay, there's a chemist missing. We have two possible candidates, but maybe the one is not really fitting into the team dynamics, whatever, and then you take the other one.
This would be amazing. I think we talked about people with ideas coming to us, right? We also need those people that have no ideas yet, but interest, exactly for that reason that you just said. Sometimes we need somebody else. So right now I'm mostly using the PhD distribution list as an email to say, hey, there's a co-founder opportunity. But the more people also just reach out to us when they don't have an idea and they just have interest and they want to maybe look into some of the formats, or they want to get to know some teams that are also looking for a certain type of expertise, that is super helpful, because then we have exactly that. I mean, we can match the external parts, right? The expertise. I sometimes ask, what kind of chemist do you need? Because a biochemist is very different from the more technical chemist, and you really need to see a little bit what is most helpful. But in the end, it will all come down to also personal preference and how well they get along. And that is something we can't influence. So the pool needs to be bigger, or it would be amazing if it was bigger for people who are interested in entrepreneurship, who would love to do something, but maybe don't have an idea yet. And that's fine.
You have a really exciting job, by the way.
I do. I love my job.
Managing all these groups and the different sciences. Amazing. So how many teams that have an idea are you currently managing at the TUM Venture Chem space?
So in general, at the Venture Labs, I think we're over 450 teams or something. Okay. But then when you split it in the areas, at the moment, what we have documented on Salesforce, so we try to find a process to do all of that. It's like 17 teams, I think, over like different areas of chemistry. We have a huge increase in the battery part at the moment, like new battery materials, but also battery recycling, sodium-ion batteries, things like that. Green chemistry and circularity becomes more and more important. I mean, you might know about I said I was working on microplastics. Plastic is definitely a current issue that contributes to many things that are not great. So thinking about what can we recycle, what technologies can we use, all of that. And we definitely have also a growing area in the pharma life science department on new drug developments, antibiotics, things like that. So it's really hard to say only one area grows. But then I think I was kind of expecting that, because there's so much unused potential, right? In all areas. Maybe I don't know, a few years, we will say, okay, this area is definitely the prominent one.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I love that people come to us with ideas. We can help them, support them in all kinds of different areas, because this shows exactly what we thought there would be, right? So much potential not used, and now it's like coming out, and we can really support and help.
How long does the process usually take from you come with an idea and then you have, let's say, at least a feeling, okay, this might become something, or no, this is a failure, we do something else? I mean, it's probably hard to say it,
yeah. I mean,
on
you might
average.
know the answer.
Yeah.
It depends.
It depends, of course. But so on average, are it 1 year or 5 years, or I mean, okay,
I think
the TUM
it's
Venture
really
Lab is,
super dependent on what people come with, right?
yeah.
When I take one of our startups, I talked to them, I think 2 years ago when I started, roughly, or 2.5 years ago, maybe two. And they came and they said they want to do carbon capture stuff. They have read a patent, they have an idea. We talked that they would need a chemist. They did that, and now they have their own lab currently set up in Ismaning, and they have their first proof of concepts, and we could support them with lab space in the beginning. They have funding. Super amazing story, right? And it only took 2 years for them to really set something up. For some of the other teams that do, for example, antibiotics, it's not that they need more support from us. It's more that the drug development just takes longer, the clinical studies, things like that. So they've been working on it, I think, since 2020 or 2019, something like that, since they founded their company. And they're also doing great. It's just that this is such a different area that they can't do better in a way.
But is there a limit, let's say, from TUM Venture Labs?
We have a few progress pitches in that way, or we are currently also implementing a structure to recheck. I think we realized that we call it coachability, but also this: do they really listen to our advice, or question it and come back? That's totally fine, right? But is there a really good connection and conversation? Is becoming more and more important, because we really can't help the teams that do their own thing and don't listen at all. But that's really nearly never the case that you feel like I talk and they don't soak it up also. Like it's really a good connection. I think we stop in a way when we can't help anymore. And that is, again, very individual, but it can be with Carbon Atlantis that I've just mentioned. They've moved in their lab in Ismaning. We can't really do a lot for them anymore. At some point, they will become our alumni teams in a way. They've done the programs that also the Unternehmertum is doing. They've been in our lab. They've grown so much that the lab is too small, which is fine. They have their own lab. And now, of course, they're in our ecosystem. They serve as role models. They participate in things, but ourselves, the way we are set up at the moment, can't help that much. Why I'm saying we are set up at the moment we support teams mostly before incorporation with the TUM connection. But then, of course, we're also having discussions about some teams need to scale their teams, scale their technologies. Do we need expertise in that? Is that something? So also the TUM Venture Labs, they have their structure right now, but also that can change, adapt. It's kind of working also like a startup, I would say.
Yeah. Managing startups.
Exactly. To answer your question, it's really hard to give a definite timeline. We do our best. We can't let people into the lab the next day. That's just safety-wise not possible. But we try to support whatever they need as soon as they can, and then it depends a lot on the setup and the technology.
Yeah, and you don't have a strict limit where you say, okay, now you have to move out of the lab, even though the progress of growing, of developing the ideas isn't finished yet. So if you see there's progress, there's potential, then you don't stop.
Absolutely.
You said most startups fail because of the team, because the team doesn't get along with each other. Are there other reasons as well? Or what are the common mistakes which you definitely can prevent if you get told?
I think a lot of times I would just revise the most startups fail because of the team. I think number-wise, it's probably not the top one, but under the top 3, I think that they fail because of the team. One of the other things, of course, it's always money running out. That can happen. It can be a bad timing for something. there's in the startup curve, there's something called the Valley of Death, which basically means that point where you've done your first proof of concepts or your first steps, but then you do need a lot more money, reach the point of actually selling things. Sometimes that doesn't work for multiple reasons. And one of the other things can also be not knowing the market or having the wrong market. I mentioned in the beginning that it's sometimes things that people say like, then everybody wants it, or we'll see who wants it, and this is a cool new technology. And sometimes it's really hard to say, are you sure? Or you really think you have a problem, a product that people want? Because if you don't have a problem that a market also sees for a price that can be sold, like all those more businessy type things, but it's kind of like, this is a cool, I don't know, technology from a scientist perspective. But then if you have something like, I don't know, it's more expensive, it takes maybe a bit, it is maybe a bit faster, but that's not the pain point.
And
people probably won't buy it. This product market fit, I think, is definitely a thing that you need to, is this the right market? Is it a market that has a lot of regulation and it takes years to get into? Maybe there is another market that, like, all those considerations of how is my strategy to get into the right market in the right amount of time, whatever right means in that sense, then that's definitely super important.
Yeah, this is part of the mindset we talked in the beginning of this episode, to have incorporated the sense of what questions do I have to ask at which point, and what information is really relevant for me and my idea, and then talk to the right people at the right time. And I think there's the TUM Venture Lab, with this matchmaking and with this strong network and the infrastructure, is extremely supportive in this way.
I really hope so. I mean, asking those questions early, sending people also out to talk to real customers early on, because scientists tend to develop or want to develop it all the way. It needs to be 100% great. And we all have heard about the 80-20 rule and stuff like that, but it's super hard, I feel, and I also personally feel that, right, to talk about a product or a potential product that is not completely developed. But when you talk about finding the right market, and you know anyways that it will take a bit of time, it's really good to see if people really want that, or if there's really interest in it, or what it would have to cost in order to have interest. And this is, and you know that, right? That's what we do with the iTeams program that I've experienced actually in Cambridge, is like really just taking a lab-based technology and asking very early on questions such as, is there a market for it? What would the product have to have as properties, or any additional properties that you needed? Stuff like real world information or real industry information, because the theory of everybody wants it is great. The really, the reality of it, a lot of times, is sadly that we don't know each industries as well as we think. And there might be small things like slotting it into a manufacturing line. Is it possible to do that? If it's not, oh, well, this might be an issue. And it changes strategy a lot. And we need to do this really early.
What is the feedback of the students that are within the venture labs? I mean, do you have kind of a feedback loop where you, as a venture lab director, also change then strategy or certain processes within the venture lab?
So we're currently establishing also real, like, trackable feedback in terms of like maybe also forms and tracking that. What we do is we talk once a month in CampSpace to our teams, and we always ask them what they would like to see or what would be helpful. So they actually have the chance to tell us that. And so far, there were no big changes needed. We got some ideas for team events. We are now inviting a patent attorney, because they said this is like something that would be really interesting, things like that. And there's no like existing process yet, but this is something that is very on the top priority list of the venture labs, across all venture labs, to see what can we do better, what else is needed, where are we not great enough yet, in a way, because the way we talk about it, of course, everything is great and we love what we do and all of that, but there's always room for improvement, right? So I hope there's nothing where my teams, the people in the Venture Lab CampSpace, would say, oh God, I wish he would change that, because I wish they would have told me already. But so far it has been really good feedback.
What is the overall future of the TUM Venture Lab? Is there a specific direction, specific trend you want to develop into or something?
I think in general of the venture labs, it's seeing in which domains we can help a lot. And in chemistry, it is a really huge challenge to build the networks into those different types of industries, right? I've mentioned all the different fields, and I don't know if this changes a little bit in the future, if we divide it in a way of like pharma and then, I don't know, green chemistry or circular chemistry or stuff like that. I think it all depends on where the teams come from and what their feedback actually is, what they still need at the moment. I think we can go on for quite a while the way we do, with ideally a bit more money and a bit more manpower, women power. That would be amazing, because the more teams we get, the more that of course takes as effort to support them, to talk to them, to learn about them, but also to have equipped labs. Our labs at the moment are not fully equipped yet, because we do need to see what they need, and then we need to see if we have the money to get it for them, or if they bring the money with the public grants, for example, and establishing all the safety and all of that. This takes a lot of time, more time than you'd think sometimes, but I think it's also helping them for the next step, right? When they have their own labs and they know exactly what they need to legally do. So I hope we just get more and more teams. We'll see if we need to change the venture lab structure at some point. At the moment, I think it's really good the way it is, the connections between the teams. And yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah, leaves a lot of room for adventures, improvements, and a lot of fun. And I think you are in the middle of all this, at least for the near future.
In chem space, definitely.
Perfect. I think this is a very high note to end this episode. At least I don't have any questions left.
I think
I don't know. We have this one. Yeah, the most important
one
question.
more. What is my advice, right?
What would be your advice for a young scientist right now?
As a young scientist, I think it's really important to listen to yourself, right? To think about what excites you, what do you really want? Because in our heads, we have so many, well, we actually have two main careers. This is academia or this is industry. And there's so much more out there. And there's so many more ways. For example, in startups, you can do research. You don't have to found a startup, but what about working in one? Or looking into, I don't know, there's also science communication, which is a completely different field and we don't talk a lot about, right? And it's really hard to tell people generically what they need to do, because I really feel like this is so individual and this depends so much on, this is what I have fun doing. And if this is finding out basic workings of a cell, that's great. Then look into that, see if you want to do this as a PI, or if you want to do this in a pharma company or wherever, or in a startup. But just a little bit reflect more. And I think we learn this very little in actually our studies. Sit down and reflect on what excites you, who you are, how you work best, and then know those characteristics. And then you can ask about that in interviews. You can look around for jobs and that. And I do guarantee that you will find the job that fits. Maybe not as the first one, but also that. Then try the next job. Not saying change every 2 months. I think this is a hassle for everybody. But it's great if you find your one company forever. That's amazing. That's really good. But maybe if you change your company, if you change your pathway, also fine. You can also do that, and don't be afraid of that. Just do what you want, what excites you.
Very cool. Now we have the high note to end this podcast.
That's great. Yeah.
So it was a pleasure to discuss the startup scene, in particular here in Munich, with you. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights and your expertise. All the best to you, to the Venture Labs and all the teams. And I'm really excited what the future brings.
Yeah, thank you for having me and giving me that opportunity. It has been a pleasure to talk to you.
That's it for today, folks. If you liked this episode about the startup scene, you might also enjoy episode 2, where I talked with Christian Goldhahn about his job in a Swiss clean tech startup that focuses on producing plastics from food waste. Or if you're interested in, let's say, career options that are not so visible within the academic system, you can either listen to episode 10, where Matthias Zalewski tells us how he became a physics showmaster, or just the latest episode, that's number 15, and there you could listen to Christian Kuttner's insight into the job of a scientific editor at Nature Communications. And if you want to support me, please follow this podcast or share this episode with a friend. That would help me the most. Thank you, take care, and see you on the next episode.